These are some of the most terrifying cults that didn't just cause mass hysteria, death, and destruction, but ladies and box heads, they're still around, still recruiting and still spreading fear. Let's begin with a cult led by a man who convinced regular doctors, scientists, and engineers to carry out an attack that hurt almost 1,000 people and killed 14 of them, ending up being one of the worst domestic terror attacks in modern Japanese history. A group whose leader claimed to be a god, a group that still exists till this day. And I'm talking about Shinrikyo. But before the chaos, it all started with one man, Shoko Asahara. Born with partial blindness, Asahara grew up in poverty, and he was the son of a humble mat maker in rural Japan. Often ridiculed, isolated, and overlooked, he realized that he could completely flip that narrative, repackaging that weakness into his strength. He did this by immersing himself in esoteric teachings. And for my slower box heads out there, that means teachings that are only understood or tended to be understood by a small number of people. And these people perhaps have special knowledge. So he did this by studying yoga, occult rituals, fringe science, and Eastern philosophy. But it wasn't just about spiritual growth for Asahara. He took elements from Buddhism, twisted it with Hindu chakras. He also took some Christian apocalyptic visions, fused them with science fiction prophecies, and the result? A chaotic ideology cocktail that painted him as the Messiah, a divine being, the only one who could guide humanity through the end times. And the cult, Shinrikyo, they weren't just followers, they were the chosen ones, the soldiers of salvation. And now you're probably thinking, these are probably some lunatics. But surprisingly, they weren't desperate outcasts. These people were doctors, scientists, and engineers, Japan's best and brightest. And he recruited these people from elite universities, also spiritual retreats and online message boards. All of them had one thing in common, and that was the search for deep, deep answers. And he gave it to them along with a purpose and belonging. He created a hyper-competitive, isolated society, a new world where they could all ascend. They believed him when he said the world was ending. They also believed him when he said he was the only one that could save them. And they believed him when he said violence was necessary. You see, Asahara preached that Armageddon was coming, that the United States would start World War III, nuclear fire raining from the skies, billions to perish. But not his followers. He claimed Shinrikyo would be the only ones spared. Why? Because they had purified themselves through devotion, suffering, and absolute loyalty to him. Man, this guy a freak. Anyways, in his twisted prophecy, only those who followed the truth, his truth, would transcend death. They wouldn't just survive, they'd inherit the earth. A chosen few rising from the ashes of a dead world. So they believed the mumbo jumbo and began preparing for the end. Not by praying, but by building weapons. Labs were constructed, gas was produced. They were testing VX nerve agents on animals, and eventually people. Colorless, odorless, lethal in micrograms. Just one singular drop on the skin can shut down your nervous system permanently. It paralyzes muscles, blocks breathing, and kills within minutes. And did I mention there's no smell? There is no warning. It's a weapon of war so dangerous it's banned under international law. But to Shinrikyo, it was just a stepping stone. Basically, it was proof that they could play God or bring about the end. Okay, so what if you joined this operation and then you're like, yeah, I don't really believe in this anymore. Anyone who tried to leave disappeared. Critics were targeted, silenced, or murdered. But the most horrifying chapter was yet to come. So let's talk about it. March 20th, 1995. In Tokyo, it's morning rush hour. A city bumping with life. Millions of people, kids, nurses, students, businessmen, crammed into the arteries of the busiest subway system in the world. Every second, trains are pulling in, doors are sliding open, smell of metal, sweat, and probably coffee. It was just another Monday. Nothing about this day was really that special. But deep beneath the surface, death was riding with them. 5 members of Shinrikyo boarded different trains. each member wearing surgical masks, each carrying a plastic bag wrapped in newspaper. And ladies and boxheads, in those bags, liquid sarin gas. Again, a colorless, odorless nerve agent developed as a chemical weapon by Nazi scientists. Okay, if it's a weapon developed by Nazis, you already know that no one should have their hands on it. Anyways, they sat quietly, held the bags on their laps, then they dropped the bags, punctured them with sharpened umbrella tips, and calmly walked away. The sarin began leaking. It vaporized instantly, spreading across the trains like an invisible phantom. There was no warning, no fire, no sound, just agony. Passengers began choking, collapsing, and dying. One woman collapsed, frothing at the mouth. Another screamed, gasping for air, and then silence. Just bodies slumped on seats. They weren't moving at all. Train after train pulled into stations with the dying and the dead. And like you would expect, panic spread like wildfire. In the end, 14 people were killed and almost 8,000 injured. And when I mean injured, blinded, paralyzed, or poisoned. Or all. And the man behind it all? Shoko Asahara. He calmly was sitting in his compound, watching the whole thing unfold. When the police raided Ahm's facilities, they found enough chemicals in the facility to kill millions. And they also found torture chambers and stockpiles of weapons. And also blueprints for mass destruction. The cult was not just dangerous, it was organized, militarized, and deeply brainwashed. Eventually, and as you would expect, Asahara was arrested. His trial became a media spectacle. He remained mostly silent, blank, smiling. In 2004, he was sentenced to death, and he was executed by hanging on July 6, 2018. But here is the chilling part about all of this. The cult didn't die with him. Aum Shinrikyo still exists till this day. But ladies and boxheads, today it's called Aleph. And did I mention it's very much alive? The group split into factions, some more violent than others. They've rebranded, sure, but the core beliefs are still intact. They still see Asahara as a divine figure, and they still believe in Armageddon. Oh, and they're still recruiting. Quietly, carefully, and especially among the youth. In 2023, Japan's Public Security Intelligence Agency confirmed that Aleph remains under surveillance. But even then, they're legally allowed to operate. They hold meetings, spread ideology online, sell literature. I mean, guys, they're literally hiding in plain sight. And while they haven't repeated the same scale of violence, no one forgot what they did. Now, some cults like the one we just talked about are born in the shadows, but this one we're about to talk about is born in Hollywood. It wears a suit, speaks in corporate slogans, hides behind glass buildings and smiling celebrities. And ladies and boxheads, I'm talking about Scientology. It all started with a man named L. Ron Hubbard, a failed science fiction writer. A man who once said you don't get rich writing science fiction. If you want to get rich, start a religion. And what do you think he did? He did exactly that. The year was 1950, America was riding the post-war boom. People were looking for answers, and I'm talking about spiritual ones. And Hubbard gave them exactly what they wanted, wrapped in madness. He called it Dianetics. A self-help philosophy that promised to clear the mind of pain, trauma, and fear. To become clear was to become perfect, invincible. But clearing the mind didn't come easy or cheap. People sat for hours in cold rooms holding strange metal cans, attached to a machine called an e-meter. The process was called auditing. They spilled their deepest secrets, confessing shame, trauma, and guilt. All of it was recorded and all of it was filed. And the price? Thousands of dollars. Tens of thousands of dollars, may I add. Man, what are these people doing with this much money? Let me hold $1. The deeper you went, the more you paid. They said you were healing, but really you were being watched, controlled, and owned. At first, it all felt like a strange mix of therapy and science fiction, until you reached a level called Operating Thetan Level 3. That's when it stopped being strange and became absolutely boxhead insane. because that's when they would hand you the secret scripture. And it tells you this: 75 million years ago, a galactic tyrant named Xenu ruled over a massive federation of planets. But overpopulation became a problem. So Xenu gathered billions of souls, paralyzed them, and flew them to Earth, then known as TGAC. He dropped their frozen bodies into volcanoes and detonated hydrogen bombs. The souls of these murdered aliens, now called Thetans, still cling to human beings today, causing fear, pain, and psychosis. And only Scientology can remove them all for a price. Ladies and gosh darn boxheads, you cannot make this mumbo jumbo up. But somehow our freaky ass L. Ron Hubbard did. And guys, seriously, they believed him. Members are told that reading this too early will literally kill them. Their minds aren't ready, their souls could rupture. So they obey, they go deeper, and they pay more. And once they're in, getting out becomes almost impossible. Critics say Scientology is a religion. Survivors say it's a prison. Just like our last cult, the moment you start questioning anything, they turn on you. There's a policy, a written rule, it's called fair game. Anyone deemed as an enemy of Scientology can be tricked, lied to, sued, or destroyed. That's not speculation, that's from Hubbard himself. Former members have been followed by private investigators. Their phones tapped, their homes watched. Some say they were locked in secret compounds, cut off from the world, forced to confess, and punished for rebellion. Now hold on, there's a place called The Hole, a makeshift prison inside Scientology's international headquarters. Survivors of this mumbo jumbo say they were kept there for months, sleeping on the floor, eating scraps, shouting apologies for crimes they didn't even commit, fighting each other in violent confession sessions. This place had no windows, no escape, just obedience or destruction. And outside that prison, glowing celebrity endorsements. Because Scientology doesn't just recruit the lost and the lonely, it recruits only stars. I'm talking about Tom Cruise, John Travolta, Kirstie Alley, Elizabeth Moss, famous names. They all had smiling faces, but behind those smiles is just straight up fear. Now, Katie Holmes was one of them. She was the perfect wife, America's sweetheart married to Hollywood's golden boy. Flashing lights, red carpets, smiling faces, perfect teeth. But behind all of the glamour was surveillance. Katie wasn't just married to Tom Cruise, she was married into Scientology. From the outside, it looked like power, prestige, status. But inside, there was something much darker. They watched her, not just the cameras or the handles, or the ever-present entourage. It was the church, always watching, always listening. Even her daughter Suri wasn't safe. These people called it education, but it was actually conditioning. That's where Katie drew the line, not for herself, but for the child she had brought into this nightmare. From that moment onwards, it was all about the escape. She stopped sleeping properly. By day, she smiled for the cameras, playing the role, nodded through every audit. But at night, she schemed and she was planning. Absolutely no one could know. She got her hands on a burner phone, and her daughter's old toys were a perfect spot to hide it. She met with lawyers discreetly, whispered escape plans through cupped hands. Because like I said earlier, in Scientology, if they knew you were trying to leave, they were coming for you. They will strip you down mentally, turn your friends into spies, erase your family. So she waited. Just as Tom Cruise left for a shoot, she knew this was her moment. 24 hours was all it took, and a bit of luck. She managed to escape the horror, filed for divorce, changed numbers, and took her daughter and vanished like a ghost. Despite all of this, Scientology presents itself as a peaceful movement. But do not get it twisted, it thrives on control, silence, and fear. They target the vulnerable, the broken, and the lost. I don't need to explain that Hollywood can be a lonely place even with all the fame and money. Stars who are grieving, anxious, or alone. And Hubbard would train recruiters as well. He taught them how to spot this exact weakness I'm talking about. How to isolate a person from their past, how to make the cult feel like home. Once you're in, they promise success, healing, and also power. But what they really give you is chains. Because leaving Scientology doesn't just mean walking away, it means losing your family, your children, your livelihood, everything. Defectors are labeled suppressive persons. Even family members are forced to disconnect from them forever. They build loyalty through fear, they build power through silence. And they're still here. Across the world, their empty buildings stand like silent sentries, waiting for their next recruit. And unlike most cults on this list, this one didn't just vanish, it got better at hiding. Because today, the Church of Scientology remains a subject of controversy but operates in more than 150 countries today. Did I mention today? Now let's talk about our next cult. In the deserts of the American Southwest lies a town that time forgot. Townsfolk dress in modest prairie clothes. Women wear braids, no makeup. Children are silent, obedient, almost afraid to speak. Now, the place I'm talking about, or the people I'm talking about, isn't just a community. It's a church, a cult. The Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or FLDS, broke off from the mainstream Mormonism decades ago. Their mission? Well, to preserve the old ways. And ladies and boxheads, that includes polygamy. These guys are some freaks. They trying to slang that hammer around. Yeah. Anyways, why? Because the official Mormon church had renounced polygamy. It was no longer acceptable to marry multiple wives, especially underage ones. But anyways, the FLDS refused to give it up. To them, multiple marriages wasn't just a tradition, it was salvation. A divine requirement. The more wives a man had, the closer he got to God. I cannot believe what I'm reading. Anyways, that's why the FLDS splintered. They built compounds in the deserts of Utah, Arizona, and Texas. And if you've noticed anything with the 3 places I just listed, it's far away from the people, like regular people's eyes. And there they twisted scripture into chains. A place where one man could be a prophet, a king, and a predator. Let's talk about the king freak himself, Warren Jeffs. He inherited that throne that I'm talking about, and with it, the power to control every aspect of his followers' lives. Who they married, where they lived, who could they speak to, when could they speak, who they could become. The break from mainstream Mormonism wasn't just ideological, it was very intentional. A rejection of progress, a descent into the past. From what it sounds like, it's almost like women were property, and children were currency. And men, like Jeffs, ruled with divine immunity. But beneath their carefully ironed dresses and smiling patriarchs, a monster had taken the throne. He called himself the Prophet, said he could hear God's voice. He claimed every order he gave came from the heavens itself. And if you've been noticing a trend in this video, they all believed him. Every man, woman, and child. Because to defy the prophet was basically you're defying God. Look, I'm a God-fearing man myself. I'm not following no damn the prophet or whatever this guy thinks he is. Jeffs had over 70 wives. Some were women, most were girls. 12, 13, 14 years old. They were still children, still playing with dolls. Forced into marriage with a man in his late 40s, or even older. And each time he chose a bride, he said she was blessed, that she had been handpicked by God to fulfill his sacred mission. Even if she cried, even if she begged to go home. Man, this is just sick. One girl just 14 years old was told to put on her best dress. Her mother brushed her hair in silence. Her sisters stood by and smiled weakly, trying to hide their own pain. She was escorted into a candlelit room, told to kneel before the prophet. He whispered a prayer over her head, then shut the door. Now you're probably wondering what happened inside. They said what happened inside was holy, but it wasn't. It was ritual abuse, dressed in lace and lies. There were also audio recordings of Jeffs chanting hymns while the girl wept. Tapes that played like nightmares, whispers, moans, silence. He told them their suffering pleased God, that obedience and pain meant salvation. And the community, they just played along. Fathers gave away their daughters. The mothers would stitch wedding dresses for their children. And the boys of the community were trained to follow in his footsteps. If a woman were to resist, she was an outcast. If a man disobeyed, his wives and children were reassigned. Just like property. This was the FLDS under Warren Jeffs. A kingdom of fear with Jeffs on a glided throne above the law, above morality. When the FBI finally raided their massive compound in Texas, they found an entire town built to serve one man's delusions. Secret rooms, dozens of pregnant teenagers, child brides, a bed on the altar. Warren Jeffs' funky ass was finally arrested, sentenced to life in prison plus 20 years for sexually assaulting 2 girls, both underage. And guys, one of them was 12 years old and the other was 14. But here's what's deeply unsettling about this whole thing. It wasn't because there were only 2 victims, not even close. Jeffs had married dozens of underage girls. He had over 70 wives and many of them, again, were children. But now you're probably wondering, only 2 cases were used in court? Why is that? Because these 2 came with evidence. Concrete, undeniable, and it was horrific. One of them had DNA evidence that Jeffs had impregnated her. The other was the audio tape. A chilling recording of Jeffs during what he called a spiritual session. He could be heard praying, chanting, then sexually assaulting the crying girl. You could hear her sobbing, you could hear him calm, almost smug, calling it sacred or divine. Proof straight from his own mouth. The prosecution didn't need to prove dozens, just 1 or 2. To show the world what a monster he really was, but do not be fooled by the number. Those 2 girls were simply the tip of a huge iceberg. The ones that were brave enough to speak up. The rest were way too terrified, too indoctrinated. 2 hidden inside the fortress-like compounds of the FLDS, where girls were taught that men like Jeffs were God. Their silence wasn't consent. It was control, it was fear. It was the legacy of a prophet who ruled with scripture in one hand, and absolute power in the other. Jeffs remained in prison at least for another 8 years. But even behind bars, he still was the prophet. He would send messages from prison. And guys, his followers still obey. The compound still stands. And girls are still raised to believe that one day they too might be chosen. In a world built on blind faith and silence, the nightmare has not ended. Like seriously guys, can we talk more about this story? Why is this one of the only times I'm really hearing this story or researching about it? Now let's talk about a cult that started as a self-help group. Well, that's what they said anyways. NXIVM promised enlightenment, a way to rewire your brain, unlock your potential, to find inner peace through structured classes, emotional breakthroughs, and mentorship. But what its followers really found was Keith Raniere. He called himself Vanguard. They chanted this man's name, like literally. At first, it looked like just another personal development company. Boring branding, whiteboards, conferences, but beneath the surface, NXIVM was building something far darker. It was a pyramid scheme for the soul, and at the very top was Raniere. Below him, a secret inner circle of elite women. They weren't just students, they were his servants. He called it DOS. And the women in DOS, they were branded. Not metaphorically, literally. In a ritual masked as female empowerment, women were held down, naked and seared with a cauterizing pen. They thought it was a symbol, some spiritual glyph. Only later did they realize it was Raniere's initials, KR, burned into their damn skin. But before the branding ever took place, women were forced to hand over collateral revealing intimate pictures, confessions, and also dark secrets. As insurance, basically. If they ever spoke out, their lives would be ruined. And Raniere chose their diets, he controlled their weight, their sleep. Some were forced to starve themselves just to meet his spiritual standards. Others were chosen to be his personal, sexual slaves. He called it growth, almost transformative. And they called it hell. And all of this funky was happening in upstate New York. Now, Raniere's most loyal followers were Hollywood actors, heiresses, Ivy League graduates, people who you would think should have known better. But the most shocking of them all was Allison Mack. Yes, the bright-eyed star of Smallville. The girl next door, America's sweetheart. Turned recruiter, turned predator. She didn't just fall into NXIVM overnight. At first, she attended a few self-help seminars. Then more, then she found herself drawn to Rainier's strange charisma, his wordy, manipulative philosophies. He flattered her. He would flatter her by saying that she was a natural-born leader, that she herself could empower women. And that, ladies and boxheads, is how it began. He groomed her, until eventually Mac stopped questioning anything he said. She started obeying, then recruiting. She became a high-ranking member of his secret inner circle that she helped create, she helped enforce. And it was Allison Mack who convinced other women to hand over humiliating collateral to join. She was the one who told them that it was about strength, sisterhood, power. But that was not what it was. It was blackmail, entrapment, abuse disguised as mentorship. She ordered women to be branded like cattle, seared with Rainier's initials while being held down completely naked. Some cried, some screamed. All of them were told to embrace the pain, to accept it, and that it would set them free. She even helped to design the ritual. And she didn't stop there. She was responsible for directing women to be sexually available to Rainier. She pressured, coerced, and shamed them into compliance. Women who said no were threatened with the release of their secrets, photos, confessions, anything that would completely ruin them. And that's what Mac did. She weaponized vulnerability. She used trust like a knife. In court, prosecutors revealed just how deep her involvement really was. She was an enforcer, a lieutenant. She wasn't brainwashed. She built the machine. Eventually, Mac pled guilty to racketeering and racketeering conspiracy. She admitted to manipulating women into becoming slaves. And when the details came out about the branding, the sex, the starvation, people were straight up horrified, as I was when I was researching for this video. Not just because it happened, but because someone who was once seemed so innocent, so normal, had become a complete monster. Allison Mack is no longer the girl from TV, she's a cautionary tale. Proof that evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it smiles, it inspires. And Rainier convicted on 7 charges including sex trafficking, forced labor, wire fraud, and conspiracy. His funky sick ass is serving 120 years in prison. But here's the part that still keeps people, including me, awake. NXIVM isn't dead. The organization, officially collapsed, sure. But its most devout followers remain. In the United States and in Mexico, to this day, a group of NXIVM loyalists, mostly based in Mexico, worship Rainier like a prophet. No, seriously, they hold vigils outside his prison. They post videos praising him. They insist he's innocent, that everything was consensual, that he's being prosecuted by a corrupt system. Some even called the woman who testified against him liars, or worse, traitors. It's easy to believe that once the monster is caged, the nightmare ends, but NXIVM reminds us, cults don't always die with their leader. And guys, if you want to hear about more just evil and sick people, click this video right here where I talk about the smartest serial killers that have ever existed.